Locho sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trile yarngoda pelge drolor zampe ze parche palden lame shabla solvade Omo a Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om a Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhar Nishasane Kar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tudan Dagi Tünyerme Çiktu Çingilu Makyuke Kudan Dagilu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Makyuke Tudan Dagi Tünyerme Çiktu Çingilu Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam Lai Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchre Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchre Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchre Sangye Drupar Sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Hello. It's told that once a, a person, a man, went to Buddha and asked him, "But Buddha, you and your disciples, what is it that you do different from the rest of us? Well, what do you do?" And Buddha answered, "What we do is we walk, we sit, we eat. This is what we do." And this man answered, "Buddha, excuse me, but we all walk and sit down and eat. I mean, what's special? What's different about what you do?" And Buddha answered, "The difference is when we walk, we are walking. And when we sit, we are seated. And when we eat, we are eating." And this takes us to a very important aspect. Our ability to be aware of the present moment, to be present, is described as being so that the mind is present where the body is. Our body is something very important. Our body allows us, it takes us to the present moment. And if we want, we can open up an enormous chapter about what time is, what the present moment is. But let's let's stay on a more coarse level, and let's say that the present is what we're living now. Sometimes I've imagined, how would it be to bring our attention to the present if the body didn't exist? Without the body, how could we distinguish the past from a projected something projected to the future if we didn't have our body to bring us to this present moment? But the main point about being present in the present moment is, according to me, it doesn't have that much to do with past and future and present, but much more to do with the union, this consistency, this union between body, speech, and mind. In many spiritual traditions, Buddhist and non, we talk about this division between body, speech, and mind. Some traditions say it's it's important to 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 um, to do what you say and think what you do, because often we have this inner noise, what we talked about yesterday, where when you sit down to meditate and you have this kind of inner dialogue, you know, not even when you're just meditating, when you're walking. I mean, there's this inner dialogue. I think we've all had this experience, this mind that says, "Oh, but no, you know, but I say this, but what does that mean? And that person said this, and should I have answered that? Or, there's that moment of dialogue, constant conversation, inner conversation. Once I found myself, I was talking to my mom, and talking to her, I said, I don't think that I'm someone that doesn't think a lot. And there's sometimes where, I don't know, this happens often at breakfast. I sit there and I just stay there for a while as if I was a little bit dazed. And what are you thinking about? Nothing. It's not that there's something there. But talking to my mom, I think I'm someone who doesn't think a lot. And she answered, It's not true that you don't think a lot, but since you were a child, you didn't have a lot of inner dialogue. When you came home from school, I asked you, how was school? What'd you do? And you would just answer, everything's fine. But, well, you have nothing to tell me. No, because I didn't. She would said that I didn't have this thing that I needed to review everything that had happened. And there were some times actually where I perceived a kind of inner dialogue. So, given that normally it's not there, it's easier to perceive. It's easier to see when it actually is there. If it's there all the time, then one doesn't notice. But what conditions were necessary to create that increase of inner dialogue? Because it's not pleasurable, this inner dialogue. Normally, I've perceived in myself and observed in others, that most of the time this inner dialogue is not a harmonious one. Where does this kind of inner dialogue come from? I mean, there are many possibilities, but one thing that I've seen is that when there's some kind of inconsistency inside of us between what we think and what we feel. And the greater this inconsistency is between what we think and what we feel, then the greater that inconsistency will be also between what we think and what we say and what we feel and what we do. It's this part of what we feel where there's attraction and aversion, this more emotional part of ourselves that tries to convince the rational self, and vice versa. So, should I do this? No, but I don't feel like it. Oh, but this person did this. How should I react? We try to get into that. When there's harmony between what I think and what I feel, this dialogue calms down. When there's harmony between what I think and what I feel, and that it unifies with what I say and what I do, this brings an important condition to have inner peace, silence, inner silence, because one can say, okay, one can say, I'm fine with myself. In some traditions, we say our being, our body and mind can be our temple. They can be our place of refuge, because it's dangerous if on the other side, as I heard one master say, if you are alone and you're not well, it means that you are not in good company. No? And that's not a good thing if that happens. So one objective, according to me, that's important is to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror, not necessarily physically in the mirror, but to look, to bring our attention towards ourselves and say to ourselves, I am so happy to spend my life with you. I wouldn't want to be with anyone else. I'm happy. How wonderful that we can spend our life together. It's a loving oneself having a kind of, how can I say, not a friendship with ourselves, but being well with ourselves. And being well with ourselves requires this harmony from our side. So all of the parts of ourselves need to be in harmony. Very often, it's not like this. Often we say what we don't feel, or we don't think, or we do things that we don't think is the right thing to do. And inside, there's what I think, what I feel, or I should do, but I don't want to do. I want to, but I can't, etc. So we have all of these conflicts as inner dialogues. And some people ask me, well, what should I do? Should I follow all of my feelings, my desires, and suppress the reason, my rational self, or vice versa? Neither one nor the other. But he says, okay, but if I'm inconsistent, I'm incoherent, I want different things, what should I do? And this, we can talk about the art of becoming friends with ourselves, creating harmony. I imagine two people, me with someone else. And at a certain point, we're together, and at some point, we need to share a room, a dorm room, for example, with a bunk bed. So you need to share very private aspects of our life with someone else. But the problem is, this person, we don't like this person. What are our choices? We can leave, but we can't, because we don't have another place to go, and we can't send the other person away. So the choices are two. Or we live in conflict, and which increases, or we try to find harmony, which doesn't mean to agree about everything. It means respecting each other. A fundamental point, a fundamental aspect of harmony, to create harmony between two people, is respect. Even us with someone else, when we, for example, if we think differently, that's obvious. It would be strange. It's normal to think differently. It's strange to think always the same. I mean, remember yesterday we talked about these different filters. We have different upbringing, different cultures, different experiences. So of course we have different ways of thinking, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely normal. But it's important, if we want to be in harmony with others, the opposite of conflict, because let's remember that peace is not the lack of conflict. Peace is where there is harmony, and harmony needs to be built up. Conflict shouldn't be blocked, because when you block conflict, in reality, you get into a kind of neutral waiting time. It's like taking a pressure pot and closing it up, and you don't allow that steam to come out. And it seems that nothing's happening. But at a certain point, if you don't let that steam come out, it's going to explode. I don't know if you've ever seen a pressure pot explode. I didn't see it directly, but it happened at my house in Milan. I mean, you can't imagine the noise it made. Luckily, the person was burned just on the chest and not in the face, and everything was fine. But when we try to stop a conflict without building up harmony, it means that we're blocking a moment of conflict. We realize that it's not good for us to escalate the conflict by yelling, by getting violent, and we stop. Sometimes stopping the conflict, maybe we put nice things, on top, just to embellish it. Okay, we stop fighting, we share a glass of wine, we do something nice to block this conflict. But what happens is that conflict underneath is still there. And so when you stop the conflict without building up harmony, then that conflict is just going to come back in a different moment, in a different moment. It, it's going to is going to show, it's going to show itself again. I don't know if it's ever happened to you to fight for silly things, you know. Maybe with another person, really important conflicts come up based on very silly things. I mean, so are you fighting about those silly things, or is there something underneath, something deeper that has been left? So for there to be harmony, which needs to be built up, the basis is respect. So I'm when I look to the other, there's respect for the happiness and for the suffering of the other. We're accepting that we think differently, but we're being kind and welcoming the other person. And when we talk about building up harmony, it's it's inevitable that we need to create this respect. And it's if we even if we think on the macro level, this like even armed wars, the real objective isn't winning a war or stopping a war. I mean, our real objective should be building peace. Because if I stop the war, but I don't put up energy to create pause, we're just making an armistice. If we look at the conflicts today, I mean, they're not about things that have happened today. I mean, but we're not here to talk about the macro level. We're here to talk about the micro level. We're here to talk about us with ourselves. So even if we imagine us with someone else, to create harmony, we need to respect each other. We need to accept each other. And this means also to compromise. Compromise, okay, you like to do like this, I like to do like that, but then there's also there's a meeting point. And if when between the two people there is an actual meeting point, which is respect and possibly love, which means if I love you, your happiness is a priority for me. If I love you, your suffering is also a priority for me. And when that is there, it's incredible, because even if something alone for me I wouldn't like, but if it's good for you, then at that point I like it. I don't know if that's clear. But it's difficult when we talk about our relationship with others, because often what I see that is said, it's true, Lama, but I can do everything, and the other one? And this morning, I wanted to bring a little book that I was reading. There was the passage that I really liked. I'll bring it. I forgot it. I'll bring it. The point is, I mean, we need to act where we have the opportunity, the possibility to act. So when we talk about our relationship with others, I can't change anybody's mind. I don't know if you've ever tried to change someone else, your own children, your parents, your partner, whoever. I've tried, and I've never been able. And then at a certain point, and then you feel absolutely, you feel that you don't have, you feel powerless, you feel upset with the other, but it's incredible that we could think that we actually have the power to change someone else. Sorry if I say it, but very often our fixation, which is with this fixation masqueraded by compassion, we try to change others instead of working on ourselves. There's a fundamental point that is we need to begin our path where we are. The closest it's said that the closest point to reach any place is where you are. Someone could say, you know, I'd like to go to Borobudur in Indonesia. You know, it would be easier if I were in Malaysia. Well, it'd be easier if you were already in Jakarta. But the point is, you are here. You know, and if you need to plan a trip, you need to plan a trip, you need to plan from where you are. So maybe I say, oh, Lama, I'd like to get there, but I don't have money to get there. If I were already halfway there, I'd be able to get there. So we victimize ourselves. We say, oh, it would be beautiful. Oh, I would like to meditate every day, but my children don't allow me to, and this one doesn't let me do that. We create so many interferences to say, if it were not for the world that creates problems for me, I would already be enlightened. The world is like, the world doesn't let me. And then and those who've been in Buddhism for longer, maybe they say they're interferences. We need to start where we are. This is the only real possibility, the only real possible starting point, no matter where you want to go. And we need to walk with our own legs. We can't have other people walk for us. And understand that in our interacting with others, every interaction brings a transformation. And what I am interacts with others and creates a transformation. So my transformation inevitably transforms those with whom I interact. So we need to start by creating harmony. We need to be in harmony with others. And if that person is in harmony with us, that's not up to us. We can't do differently. That's up to that person to manage himself. I've seen Lama Ganchen. I saw Lama Ganchen many times. He had this attitude where he would say, I give you my friendship, and if you want to give me your friendship, that's up to you. But I've given you my friendship, and that remains for life, and it's my choice. I'm not going to change how I behave. How I behave is up to me. How you behave is up to you. But when we talk about inner dialogue, we have a point to our favor. When we talk about conflict with others, I can do my side, but I can't do anything on for the other person. But here we can, when we talk about just harmony, the inner dialogue, it's ourselves on both sides, the feeling and the thinking. So we need to find this meeting point within. And often when there's some kind of discussion, before finding a common ground, we need silence and understand that we want the same thing, just in different ways. And this is another aspect that meditation helps us also with this, allows us to stop, calm this dialogue. Okay, say everything's okay. Look at these aspects, and then we'll find this another moment where each side respects the other. So I don't want to convince you. You don't need to convince me, but we need to be in harmony, work good together. One doesn't need to overwhelm the other. I don't know if this reasoning is clear, because our tendency is that we don't want to have contradictions within. So, and the day that you will be a Buddha, you won't have contradictions. I imagine it's like this. I hope it's like this. It's normal that we have contradictions within. Often I've felt something and thought I've felt something and thought something different, but where I find peace within is in respecting and and creating a harmonious inner dialogue. It's almost like a part of ourselves looking at the other with love and and agreeing on a common path. And this respect requires also a kind of, I don't know the right word in Italian. In Brazilian we say abrir mão, to 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 let go of something. So sometimes, so I do. So sometimes you do, sometimes I do, and we respect each other. Something that's important, though, like if someone who says, "No, you should do like this." It's happened to me to be in the car, for example, and someone says, "No, no, this is not the right road. You need to do the right road." No, I've done both of them, and I know this is the right one. But that person is so convinced. I say, "Okay, we'll we'll do the other one, which is longer, the longer and other problems." Where's the real training here? When you do take the other road that the other one suggested, and it didn't work out well, you stay quiet instead of saying, "I told you so." You see, that it reminds me that once we were here and we did a fire puja, and under the and under under the actual metal fire, um, they put two wooden pallets, and so it wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the greatest choice, because during the whole puja there was someone there with water, was keeping the wood from burning. And afterwards, when someone was saying, "Oh, we need to tell the person who did this," that it, and there was someone in Tibetan who said this to Geshe-la, and we need to say it. It's just that person needs to understand. And Geshe-la gave him a very simple answer. With calmly, he said, in Tibetan, with the translation, would be like the direct experience. The direct experience of someone talks 1,000 times more than than 1,000 times more than being being corrected, let's say. I mean, the person saw what was happening. So sometimes when when we try to convince someone and it doesn't go exactly how our rational side thinks, or how our feelings, or how our feelings thinks, um, okay, no, but we've chosen together to follow this path. Everything's fine, and little by little, we make adjustments on the way we act, the way we think. But here, there's something really important. It's a bit difficult for me to put into words. Between our thinking, our rational side, which is a fruit of the information that we've received and elaborated, and our feelings, which is the fruit, the result of what we've lived and experienced. We have these two sides. There's a part in the middle, and I don't know what kind of name to give it, but I would call it our intuition. There's there's a part inside which is neither rational nor emotional, but is often right. This intuition, this is a very wise part of us, but whose voice is not very strong. It's like in the middle of chaos, and there's the wise man in the middle of this chaos, and he's just whispering, and what he's saying is the right thing, but To be able to listen to him, we need to quiet down. So it's important for us when we see that we have these dialogues, we need to be quiet. And we'll see that there's a part of ourselves, and each one along his path will learn how to recognize it. There is a more consistent view, there is a wisdom that comes from the heart. But for this, we need to create these moments of silence. This reminds me also of reading. There are also some important businessmen, modern times. I think of once I saw a documentary on him, and the other one I read the autobiography. I think of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Bill Gates, I'm sorry, Steve Jobs said that when he needed to take it, um, when he needs to take an important decision, he takes a week, and he calls it the think week. He takes he he takes us he goes to a small cabin. He brings the food with him and all the books with him, and for a week, so he brings the books on that subject, and he spends the week thinking and reflecting on this subject in the middle of nature to be able to make a choice with awareness. This is Bill Gates. If we look in other people's stories, they say that their own creativity, their own intuition is important. This creative process, for example, is made up of four steps, four passages. I mean, where do ideas come from? There's a first step, which is contact. I see something, I hear something, I enter into contact with something. Then there's the second step is this kind of incubation period where that information stays inside in a non um, like with non awareness. It's just we elaborate inside, and then that third step is often has nothing to do with the first two steps, but it is a condition and it wakes up the idea. So often ideas come out in the strangest of places. If you look at great scientists, those who've had fantastic ideas, often, those ideas didn't come fixating specifically on that. Think about Einstein, for example. He had a technique that he said, he called it the 1 minute nap, where he would say the best ideas came when he was in a kind of waking, sleeping state. So he would take a a metal spoon, and then he would fall asleep, and then as soon as would fall asleep, he would drop the spoon, and and the spoon would drop, and it would wake him up, because he said in that space is where the best ideas came up, because in that space one lets go of that conceptual control over things, and one relaxes, and it's in that moment there's a kind of dialogue between these two parts that allow ideas to come out. It's for this that when we talk about meditating, there's also this aspect of allowing ourselves rest. And it's a moment where, and it's fundamental for us to 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 welcome, to be kind with ourselves in every aspect. If we say, "Oh, I have thoughts that aren't good," okay, I I accept them. I feel things. I feel things I shouldn't feel. No, I accept them kindly. If we try to meditate starting with, "Oh, I shouldn't think about this or I shouldn't hear that," then we shouldn't even start. As we said, just like I said yesterday, don't think about the green monkey. No, I don't want to feel that. I have this feeling of I have this feeling of resentment, and um, you know, um, like like Kung Fu Panda, inner peace, inner peace, inner peace, and then you explode because it's important to understand that we need to start where we are. We we can't be anything different than what we are, or start with the idea of, oh, it would be better if. No. I mean, if we all already had the ability to sit down with perfect concentration without fear, anger, resentment, that would be great, wouldn't it? But we are what we are, and that's fine. The point isn't pointing and saying, that's not right and this isn't good, because let's remember that by when we point our finger in the darkness and complaining about the darkness does not take away the darkness. What takes away darkness is light. So with ourselves to say this isn't right, that's not right, once we've seen it, okay, when we sit down and we're there, it's our moment not to justify our negative emotions. It's not the moment to tell our thoughts, yes, you're right, that's right. It's not that time for that either. It's a moment to accept ourselves with love and kindness. Here I am. I am here. And we try simply to be at peace with ourselves. Then what comes together with this is that the more we're able in our daily lives to have consistency between what we feel, what we think, what we say, and what we do, much better. Because when I go to meditate and I say things that I don't think, I do things that I don't feel, etc., and then when I sit down again to meditate, it comes out again. It creates even more and more conflict and malaise. So it's important for us to try also, what try also when we're not meditating, though our daily conduct is fundamental, our way of interacting, of speaking, of living our lives generally. This is very, very important, because there are those who might think, oh, I go to meditate, and by meditating I resolve all my problems. I mean, that would be great. But it's a together. I need meditation helps me create inner states that help me. But together with that, I need also to direct. I need to put effort into the way I interact with others, how I speak, how I eat, how I walk, how I work, how I live my life. In every aspect, these two things go together. And when they walk in the same direction, one helps the other, one supports the other. And this is a fundamental aspect, fundamental point. Now, when we sit down to meditate, first, before reaching a state of concentration where we calm this strong inner dialogue, one thing we should do is accept ourselves, pacify conflicts, the ones that are manifested at the time. And one way to do this is a technique that we've used this morning and yesterday. It's just the first part. Now I want to explain the next part, the following part. What we did before is where we observe, first of all, are the accumulated tensions in our body. When we inhale, we direct our attention, we direct our breath, we direct our intention towards where we recognize the tension, our shoulders, in our face, our nose, around our eyes, or maybe around our stomach. Where there's tension, we direct our attention there. And when we exhale, we imagine that tension dissolves and leaves our body, and that part of our body relaxes. So we did that yesterday, and we did it this morning as well. And this is something little by little, when you do it more and more, you'll see that first we start with the more obvious tensions, and then little by little, there are tensions in our body that have been accumulating over a long time. So we, little by little, were able to recognize them. I call them micro tensions. You know, it seems like we're relaxed, but little by little, when one realizes that there are parts of our bodies that are still tense, and little by little, we relax those parts of our body too. So I inhale, I direct also the air where that tension is. And when I exhale, I dissolve that tension and I let it as if that tension leaves the body together with my breath and dissolves into the space. And I say this because some people have said to me, oh, so what do I do? I throw my tension onto the person sitting in front of me. No, we imagine that it dissolves into space. Once we do this, the next step is starting to observe the, the, the tensions that have accumulated in our mind. I've always done it in one time, but you could also divide it into two. We observe where there are tensions in our mind. What do we mean by tensions in our mind? Anxiety, fear, jealousy, envy, attachment, arrogance, miserliness. This is feelings, many feelings that we have that generate tension. Just imagine when we have a feeling of miserliness or anger or something similar, physically, do we feel relaxed or do we feel tense? I've never seen Yeah, I've never seen anybody say like, "Let me get angry a little bit so I can relax." Normally, it's the opposite. Thinking about this once, I got to my conclusion. I mean, one of the best way to see if our emotions are positive or negative is by looking at the body's reaction. I mean, if it's something that creates tension, it's a little generalized what I'm saying, but if there's tension created, um, then it's negative. I mean, we could debate about this, but just generally speaking, if our body becomes tense, then we could say it's a negative feeling. So after having relaxed our body, we try to recognize our emotions that are present, um, manifested or on a more subtle level, but are there. Maybe we have anxiety, a bit of fear, some anger, resentment, attachment, dissatisfaction, or feeling unworthy. I mean, there can be many things. What's important in this phase is we shouldn't explain or justify anything, just recognize where there's tension. And we recognize this tension, we inhale, we gather up that tension, and we exhale and we dissolve it and let it leave my body, dissolve into space. We do this in our mind in this present moment. It's not the time to do like self like a the self analysis, or like it's like a therapy session. No, we do a kind of scanning. We see where there are the tensions. We gather up these tensions and we let them go. If I don't find any, great. And someone might say, but I feel like I'm getting worse because the more I meditate, the more things I'm finding. And that simply means that you're doing it well, and before you weren't even realizing it. And the more you the farther along you go, the more aware you become. So the second part, we recognize these these we recognize these tensions accumulated that are more mental, not emotional, but more conceptual. So there I'm sitting down to meditate, but I have worries about the past or some judgments about my present. I have thoughts that go back and forth that create this kind of tensions, worries for the future. They don't allow me to relax. And there too, I gather up these tensions and I release them. On this, there's a technique that that we should do before all of this. If we want to sit down to meditate, to recite a mantra, do a meditation, but if we realize that we we're if we realize that we're in a moment of disturbing emotion, something strong like anxiety or anger, the first technique is the breath. If that moment, if that emotion is very strong, then I inhale with my nose and I exhale with my mouth. Because if I try to sit down to meditate and I go to meditate, but it's a moment I have many thoughts, that's going to worsen the situation. I, I inside there's just like a hurricane of things, and I don't create. I try to pacify all this, but I actually need that energy just to be completely released. I need to dissipate that energy. It's not the moment to meditate. But when we sit down to meditate and there's just too much, one technique that one can try is to inhale, exhale. So we inhale from our nose and we exhale from our mouth. With this, following the same reasoning. So I inhale, I gather up all the tensions, and I exhale from my mouth, throwing it all out. And then we can add something else, which is I inhale light that brings a state of peace to me, and I exhale black smoke, taking away this negativity, taking away this tension that dissolves into space in front of me. So I inhale, exhale at the beginning. At the beginning, we inhale from our nose and we exhale from our mouth when we see that our emotions are very strong. I mean, just use that technique according to your needs. I remember once I explained this to children. They were really small, like 4 or 5 years old. They were really young. And I said, I teach you a secret. Do you ever get angry? Yes, they said, or something like this. What do we do? When you're angry, you do like this. You. So throw away your anger like this. And after a while, it, I heard that one of these children was at home, and this the mother sees the son at home just doing. And the child says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" He says, I'm throwing away my anger. Just give me a minute. I'm throwing my anger." And he says, "Are you feeling better?" "Yes, I'm feeling better." So these are things that we need. We need to use them when we need to use them. And from my experience, these are techniques that work when they're used. So when we're in a situation, it could be just in our daily life, and we recognize a strong emotion coming in that moment, even if we're not sitting to meditate, we just take a little break from what we're doing, and we just inhale. The two techniques, either we inhale, and we concentrate, we bring the breath to where we have the tension, and then we release that emotion, that tension, or simply we inhale light and we exhale negativities, this dark smoke, and this light brings me this feeling of peace. So I substitute, I inhale, I connect with this feeling of calm, balance, and peace, and then I exhale that tension, that negativity. So when we sit down, if we realize that there's just a lot there that's elaborating, and this happens, it can happen. At that point, I inhale from my nose and I exhale from my mouth. After a while, when we realize that that intensity has diminished, I continue with the same technique, but inhaling and exhaling from my nose. And at that point, we concentrate on dissolving the tensions. And then after a while, we concentrate on the other technique where we inhale light and we exhale black smoke until we feel that we are completely filled with light. And there's a full feeling of peace. And we rest our mind with that inner feeling of peace. Someone has already said, "Oh, Lama, every time I do this, that smoke just never ends. I never get to that feeling of peace. But there's no hurry. There's we don't need to be in a hurry. What's really important here is that even the Lojong teachings, the mind training teachings, one vow says, don't Don't try to be the first to win the race. Don't try to be the first in the class. We don't have to be perfect, and we need to accept ourselves. And in this moment, I see in this moment there's a lot that I need to get rid of. Okay, there's no hurry to get there, but there's a hurry to start walking. If I get there and I see that there's a lot to elaborate, you know, then we just accept that that's where we are instead of saying, "Oh, I'm not able. It's too difficult. There's too much." No, no. Accept where you are. To accept where you are, with kindness means accepting our complexity. Accepting doesn't mean to it doesn't mean giving it doesn't mean giving up or accepting, like saying, I have a lot of anger inside me, I need to accept it. No, does that mean that I need to keep feeding my anger? No, accepting my where I am with all this fear means I'm going to stop feeding that anger. Um, I'm going to accept myself and I'm going to direct myself towards what I want. I'm not going to go in opposition with what is there, but I'm going to direct myself towards what I want to be there. Is that difference clear? So when we see that there are feelings or tensions, we shouldn't try to oppose them, but instead we should direct ourselves towards what we want. So we direct ourselves towards a state of peace, of calm, of love, etc., according to what it is that we want, without opposing what we have. And gradually, one thing takes, gradually, one replaces the other. So it's light that takes away darkness. So we have a technique where we inhale from our nose and we exhale from our mouth to dissolve the stronger emotions. Then we have inhaling and exhaling both from the nose with the same intention. And then we have two variations. One variation where we don't visualize anything. We simply direct our breath towards where there's tension, body and mind. And when we exhale, we allow that tension to dissolve and to leave our body. In the other case, we inhale light, and this light, we can imagine it's the light that brings us blessings. We can imagine it's a light that is the nature of love and balance and peace. We can add many details, but at the basis, we visualize light that fills us up. And when we exhale, where the tensions are, they're released in the form of black smoke from our nose, or they come out of our mouth, or just nose to nose, depending on how we feel. If we see that we sit down to meditate and we're fine with ourselves, then we don't need to do all that. Or maybe you do it just once. Okay, I feel relaxed. And now we go to the next step. There's some times where one sits down to meditate and it says, oh, okay, no, let's let's recognize where we have tension. Someone say, oh, Lama, I wasn't even able to meditate. I just stayed there. That's absolutely fine. How can I say we? Sometimes I hear, oh, because I don't do things well. I should be able to visualize like this or like that. And I see that very often we have a kind of attraction and interest for techniques, for more advanced techniques. And we have a kind of, sorry if I say it like this, but we have this romantic idea or idealized idea of being able to do more complex meditations, which is wonderful, but we need to start where we are. If today I'm not able to concentrate on my breath because I have emotions that are too strong, and I stay in a kind of pre-meditation to relax myself. If that's what I need now, that's absolutely fine. We need to use what we need at the moment and not push ourselves um, um, to do what we're not ready to do. Remember, we need to start where we are. The closest point of our closest point of arrival is where we are. Like a Mahamudra meditation, for example, is very advanced. Is meditating on the lack of inherent existence of oneself. It's one of the most most beautiful meditations possible. They asked me here to give teachings. I gave 2 teachings, and I thought, let's let's stop here because it's useless to be talking about why. Why study poetry if we're learning A, B, and C? Then for the Mahamudra, years later, we looked at the whole text. But if I'm not even able to put letters together, then I'll be very frustrated when I'm not able to read poetry and 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 obviously not able to write poetry. So useless to start somewhere where we're not. So we start where we are, and every time we sit down to meditate, we're always somewhere different. I mean, different things happen. Sometimes we're more calm, sometimes we're less calm. So last time I was able to do it well, this time no. Okay. We're changing. We're not always the same. So all of this to say that these techniques that we're seeing, they should be used according to one's own needs. One can get to a point where and it's not even that hard, not that hard, maybe one sits down, one inhales and exhales, and one is already ready. Other times, after 3 hours of inhaling, exhaling, then one's not ready. That can happen too. So let's adapt to our needs. Let's go ahead. So one technique is we identify where our tensions are and we dissolve them. And with this, we conclude this pre-meditation part. I think there's something that I think is very interesting. I mean, just allowing ourselves to sit down and relax without the expectation that we're meditating is very important. And I think that it's something that really works better for us. How can I say? this metaphor comes, this analogy comes to me. Imagine we have a dog, and we want the dog to be in a closed space. Okay, still, if I take the dog and I close him up, and outside there are many distractions, I think about my Maitri, my dog. No, she calls. I mean, she comes when I call her. But at home, when there are other animals out in the woods, she goes crazy. It's useless to call her and tell her to stay still. So if I close up the dog, I fence up the dog, and I say you have to be here, but outside there are many distractions. The dog's not able to stay calm, even if it's in his fenced up and can't get out, but the dog is full of anxiety instead. And then if there's a way to get out, she'll find it. If I tell our mind to stay calm, relaxed, and still, and we try to force our mind to do that, there's that rebellious side of us. I mean, the more we try to force our mind, the 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 more our mind will want to escape. The first sound that comes out, the mind will escape. Instead, if we say, okay, here's the space. It's fenced up, but there's the door, and the door is open. Come, sit down, relax. Maybe you fall asleep, you can get up. So we should do this with ourselves. So instead of saying, I have to sit here and force ourselves to stay on one thing, instead we should allow ourselves to relax in this state. Because even just staying still physically, if we're not used to it at the beginning, that can seem very difficult, can't it? To stay there still without moving, then there's a feeling, oh no, I need to move. There's just some kind of need to move. But if we say to ourselves, I'm not obligated to stay here, but I'm just allowing myself to relax, and gradually one relaxes in that state. One recognizes the tensions of the mind, of the body. We create a safe place, a comfortable place for ourselves. If we're able to create this comfortable and safe place for ourselves, with ourselves, then for meditating, we can meditate with the doors wide open, because our fence has lots of holes, trying to force the mind to stay still, then there's, this feelings of the body, and the sensations of the body, and the memories, etc. Instead, if we're comfortable and relaxed with ourselves in that present moment where we are, that allows us really to be able to concentrate. Now we'll explain a little bit more the techniques of meditation. But I think these techniques of pre-meditation are very important, because I'll just repeat it one more time. This allows us to create this safe place where to begin. I don't know if you ever tried to meditate, and have you ever tried to meditate and instead you feel like the dog that's fenced in, the dog wanting to get out? Once someone said to me years later, said that the first time I started to meditate, the feeling was like my nails on a chalkboard. I needed to do something. Instead, if one begins to creating this space, and then it becomes much easier. Even if meditation is an exercise of the mind, our body and mind are always together. And if we're not able to be well with our body where we are, then it's going to be difficult to be well with our mind in that same context. So now let's go forward. In meditation, in actual meditation, there are some important elements in regardless of whether it's analytical meditation, single-pointed meditation, or this meditation of the shargam, the stages of meditation. There's always an object of meditation that is always the same. And there's he who meditates, us, and then there's the object of meditation. The object of meditation is where we place our attention. It's where we rest our mind. It's important that when we place our attention on an object, regardless of what it is, the attitude with which we do it is, it's not, oh, I need to do this. All my attention is there, and with tension, I need to focus on this bell. It's not an attitude of tension, of tension towards the object. Instead, I'm resting my mind on that object. Like, I think it's happened to everyone to have many, many thoughts, moments of anxiety, to not be well, even maybe being well, but maybe like a memory that you have as the memory of a caress, a memory of a caress, and just thinking about that one lets go and relaxes, or remembering, or hearing a music similar that really relaxes the mind. Similarly, in meditation, one should rest one's mind on the object of meditation. But this shows us an important key. So we are not emptying our mind of any thought. Meditation is resting our mind on an object of perception. So we train our mind to be still, relaxed, rested on one object without jumping from one object to the next. Someone might say, oh, but my mind is always like that. That drawing that I showed you yesterday, it comes from the teachings of Buddha. Buddha's been talking about this mind as the monkey mind for centuries. I mean, why the monkey? And nothing against the monkeys, but have you ever seen a monkey? There are not many monkeys in Italy. I lived in India for many years. Also in Brazil, we have monkeys, but they just spend their time jumping from one branch to another, one tree to another. It's our mind that's not able to stay still on one thing. It jumps to what one sees and one hears and one thinks constantly. And this is a great enemy to meditation. There are two main interferences, obstacles to meditation. Qinghua, which is a foggy mindedness or mental torpor, and mental agitation. So that jumps from one thing to another. When we start meditating more, when we start meditating more, it's the foggy mindedness that is the greater obstacle. Because when we meditate, we have one object of perception. It can be our breath or correct view of reality. It can be many things. It can be a concept. It can be an image. It can be a physical feeling. Many, many things. So I have one object on which I rest my mind, and I stay in a state where there's clarity in that object. My mind sees it clearly. And the more I am in the presence of that object, it's as if the more time goes by, the more focused that object becomes. And when we have mental fogging, and we have foggy mindedness, maybe we get to a point where the mind doesn't jump around. We don't have agitation, but then that object of meditation becomes blurred, and we don't have clarity. The problem is that that foggy feeling is pleasurable, and there's a danger that one stays in that foggy minded state, and one thinks that one is actually meditating. But if I'm meditating, what am I familiarizing myself if I stay meditating? If I am taken by the mental torpor, foggy mindedness for an hour, I'm familiarizing my mind with foggy mindedness. Because remember that we meditate to create familiarity with an object. The more my mind stays on an object, the more familiar my mind becomes with that object. So if I stay in a state of mental torpor, I'm familiarizing myself with this foggy mindedness state. Have you seen the movie? It was called Samsara. There were two films actually named Samsara. One that was wonderful, and one that I didn't like at all. Herzog is the one who who directed this marvelous one. It was kind of a poetry. Was the only images, and he describes samsara in images. It's really a beautiful, beautiful film. It's only music and images. It's special. Samsara, and another samsara that tells the story about a monk who finishes a retreat. And without into getting to the aspects of the actors, but I didn't like it. I didn't like it on just a conceptual reason. It starts in a horrible way. This starts with this monk who ends this retreat of 3 years. So they call him after 3 years, after this long retreat period, and they open up the cave basically at the end of his retreat, and it seemed like he's incredibly dazed. It seemed like he's drugged. I mean, they had to take him by hand as if he didn't understand. And as soon as he sees an object of desire, which in this case is a woman, he just jumps on her without any kind of control. And the film just goes on like from bad to worse. And after he leaves his spiritual life and goes to live with this with this woman, he sees how difficult it is. He's a horrible. He's, he's a horrible father. He's a horrible husband. He leaves his family life, goes back to be a monk, as if leaving that family life is samsara. Anyway, it's just wrong from beginning to right. But when we meditate, our mind is awake. It's clear. When you see things with clarity and the mind is quicker, the more we take away the noise of our mind, the clearer it becomes, the easier it becomes to see and to understand, the easier it is to direct our actions, listen to, hear our intuition. So one enemy is mental agitation, the mind that goes up and down. And the second enemy is a foggy mindedness. So we recognize mental agitation easily, and it's not pleasurable. Instead, foggy mindedness is pleasurable, and there are levels of mental torpor. There's the gross level is sleep. Like when you can just taste that sleepiness. You know, if you finished meditating with that taste of sleep in your mouth, you weren't meditating, you were sleeping, which is fine. I mean, it's good to sleep. Maybe maybe you are really tired and finally you've been able to relax. That's good. You were tired. You need to rest. Many of us spend so much of our time running from one thing to the next with so much stress. Um, you know that it's wonderful you have an opportunity to 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 actually rest, but you need to first rest before you can meditate. So just all that to say that that's not meditating. So a gross level of mental torpor is when you have that, when the body and the mind is heavy. The mind is heavy, and and its maximum is the maximum manifestation would be falling asleep. Before, maybe someone can fall asleep even perfectly seated. My father told me once that many years ago, he spent a long time in India. He was go to teach-ins, and he didn't understand much that what was being taught, long teachings. He realized that he would sit at the beginning in perfect posture, and after they would tell him what a wonderful posture he had, what wonderful concentration he had, and 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 he would just fall asleep with his eyes practically open, and and he was there sleeping. I mean, it was a state of mental torpor, of mental foggy mindedness. So on this maximum level, your head falls and one falls asleep. But before that, there are many other levels. And there's a subtle level of foggy mindedness that's difficult to understand. When we look at texts that describe the different phases of meditation, Lama Tsongkhapa discussed this a lot. He talked a lot about how to recognize subtle and very subtle mental torpor. Here today, now that this is an introduction to meditation. That is a very advanced discussion. But if you're interested in this subject, there's a very important text. I think we have it. We have the translation of it, I think, in our shop. One is called the questions from Lama Tsongkhapa and the answers from Panchen Chökyi Gyatsen, because Lama Tsongkhapa at a certain point towards the end of his life, there were many discussions at the time. Each tradition, religious tradition in Tibet, one would say one thing, another would say another, and he wrote this text that I really like, where he asks questions, and he says, anyone who knows how to answer these questions well, with all of my respect, I prostrate to you. If you don't know how to answer them, then it's better to start studying. And at the time, he would say, regardless of the name you give to your tradition, if you know how to answer these questions, you are on the right path. And he asked people to answer formally and this happened only a few centuries later. Panchen Lotsen Chökyi Gyatsen, one of the great masters of our tradition, he wrote down in verses the answers, and in the translation that we have put the questions together with the answers. So there's a part of the conduct, a part of the view, and then a whole part on meditation where he goes into details on to the distracted mind and to also the mental torpor with lots of details. It's really beautiful. I say it for if there's someone out there who'd like to deepen this understanding. And then there's another very beautiful text on meditation if someone wants to deepen his understanding. One can get close to this. One needs his whole life to study this, which is called the root of the Mahamudra. it's still the same author, Panchen Lotsen Chökyi Gyatso, is very, very special. How to meditate and observe one's own mind, or the object of meditation is one's own mind, and then the ultimate nature of one's own mind. But I'm just going to close this parenthesis here. All of this to say that we have two enemies. Agitation and mental and foggy mindedness. I think for most of us, our first enemy to face is agitation, but just recognize that foggy mindedness is also an enemy. If at a certain point you're meditating, you feel all relaxed and you're able to recognize your breath, but then you're in a kind of foggy, sleepy state, relaxed state. But instead, the meditative state requires clarity. Selnang. Selnang means nardang selnam. Nar is difficult to translate. It's the kind of strength, presence, and then sel is clarity. So in the meditative state, the object of meditation that we have is clear to us. It's not foggy. The more we meditate, the more the more in focus our object needs to be. So we have one object, and we have the object that perceives it, that rests on that object. So one important thing is to choose our object of meditation, because at the beginning, when we are learning how to meditate, because afterwards one could meditate on many things, but first of all, we need to learn how to meditate. It's like, before choosing where you want to go, you need to learn how to drive. So, as I'm learning how to drive, let's do the same road again and again. It's better not to take new roads. So when we begin this process of learning how to meditate, we choose one object and we try to maintain that same object of meditation, without changing that object every day. Because once you're able to concentrate well, able to meditate, then one can substitute that object with another. So the object that I prefer, that I think at the beginning is one of the best. I don't say the best, because we are all different, and for some it could be different. But what's been taught for centuries is, to begin, we meditate on our own breath. We observe our own breath. We place our attention onto our own breath. And here, too, there are different ways of doing. One of the best ways at the beginning, most of all, is that we place our attention on the feeling at our nostrils of the air that goes in and the air that goes out. What's the object of meditation? Where are we placing our attention? Because our breath is really wide. I mean, so where does my breath begin and end? Do I imagine my breath when it's outside myself? No. And it's not the inner process within our body. No, let's find one point. And for me, one of the best points is placing our mind at our nostrils, that feeling of the air that comes in and the air that comes out. It's as easy as that. So first, we do that preliminary part of relaxing. We're seated. Once we've eliminated the various tensions and we're in a neutral state, a relaxed state, then we kindly, it's like we've done everything preparatory, and now we're just going to place our attention on the feeling around our nostrils. let's try now just to breathe, and we can perceive that feeling around our nostrils, right? You can feel it, right? What's interesting is the more you do it, the stronger it becomes. Like the example we gave yesterday about the sound, the as you take away other objects of perception, that sensation becomes stronger. The stronger that sensation becomes. So, without giving attention to other thoughts or feelings, that feeling around your nostrils becomes very strong. So, this is the first point where we're going to place our attention. So, the technique is I'm there, seated, relaxed. I did also this the part where we breathed with awareness, because we all have different ways of breathing and we don't all breathe in a healthy way. Often we have a very high breath, and here instead it's important to have a more abdominal breathing. And a technique you can do this, usually, you know, it's used to teach children. It can work also for children. It's you lie down and you take a little doll, or with the children do it with a doll, and then you have to make the doll go up and down. Have the little doll go up and go down. We breathe. Our breath is an abdominal breath. It's not up high from our chest, from our lungs. We have to bring the air low, and try to breathe in these 4 phases. So we have awareness of these 4 phases. So we inhale, we hold, we exhale, hold, inhale, hold, exhale, and hold, etc. After we've created some familiarity, and we see that our breath has its own rhythm, more and more calm, then we bring our attention to the specific sensation at our nostrils, because if we're thinking of if we're now we can place our attention onto the feeling at our nostrils, we're not worried about how we're breathing, because we bring our attention to this feeling at our nostrils. So this preliminary part of sitting down well, to feel comfortable in this place, to have awareness with our breathing, be familiar with the way we breathe, and then we bring our attention to our nostrils. What's going to happen? Now, here we are, just nice and proud that we're meditating well. And then, wait, what's for lunch? Huh? To say that the mind will start jumping from one thing to another, and then we'll say, "Oh, no, I'm not supposed to think of anything else. Go back to my nostrils. Wait, what's for lunch?" And we shouldn't, in this case, force our mind. Let's remember, our mind is resting on our object of meditation. We shouldn't try to force it to stay there. Have you ever tried to rest, to fall asleep? To sleep when there's background noise? How can one fall asleep when there's some background noise? You know, if one tries to fall asleep and there's other noise, how can you manage? If you say, no, I can't think, I shouldn't think of that noise, I shouldn't think of those. No, one needs to relax, to gradually not give attention to that noise, but we bring ourselves back to that feeling of relaxing and falling asleep. It's something absolutely normal. I imagine you've all had this experience. This happened to me often in India, when every day, almost every day, I would take a nap around at at noon. It, you know. So lunch is around 11:30. At 12:31, only the children who are awake. Everyone else is asleep. And often, they're taking a nap, but there are other things. There's light, there are some noises. If one follows those noises, then one's not able to fall asleep. But similarly, when we're there seated, when the mind goes somewhere else, we shouldn't try to block that thought. Another thought comes. It's not that the it's that it's not as if the mind follows that thought. It's almost as if that thought came to us, so that another thought has come to us, and then we find ourselves somewhere else. When another thought comes, we shouldn't block that thought. We shouldn't say, "Oh no, I shouldn't be thinking about that," and force ourselves to remain concentrated on our object of meditation. Instead, we say, okay, this thought arrived, and as it arrived, it's going to leave without grasping at it, to not give it energy. We don't give it attention, or we don't enter into any kind of dialogue with that thought. No judgment, right or wrong, it's good or bad. We simply, with kindness, we use our breath. We exhale, and when we inhale, we bring our mind towards our breath sweetly, without having to force it. Okay, there it is. So just bring our mind back there, just sweetly, without trying to block thoughts that come to our mind. Because the more we try to block them or to oppose those thoughts, the more energy we're actually giving to those thoughts. It's like I'm trying to fall asleep and there's noise. Maybe someone who is nearby who turns on the radio. The more attention I give to that noise, oh, it shouldn't be there, or I listen to the words of the radio. No, so then it's finished. Instead, we should remain indifferent and recognize as it came, it's going to leave. That text that I talked about before of Panchen Lobsen Gyatso, he gave an example that I really liked. It's a different kind of moment of meditation, but it can work here too. He says that here we're meditating and we have our object of meditation. In our case is the feeling of the air that enters and leaves our nostrils. At a certain point, really realize that our mind is somewhere else. We don't force the mind to come back. If the mind doesn't come back to the object, we don't force it. We let it go. In the sense, we create a kind of indifference because sooner or later it will come back to this present moment. This, in certain cases, it works really well. It's like think of a bird on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and the bird starts to fly, and no matter how far that bird flies and where that bird needs to come back. The, the bird needs to come back to the boat. It's amazing how these Tibetans, how they had these examples where there's no sea. But anyway, our mind has to come back. But but at the beginning, if we leave it go, then maybe we'll watch just thousands of movie scenes, and then 3 days will go by. But in this case, what we do, another thought comes, we don't give it importance. We sweetly, we kindly bring our mind back to our object of meditation, of perception, which in this case is the air that comes in and comes out of our nostrils. Remember, repeat it one more time, we should not block our thoughts. we just bring it, bring our mind back to our object of meditation. And at the beginning, it will be a constant exercise in bringing our mind back to our object of meditation. And there's a technique that we can add here that can help us. This technique of counting our breath. So there we are, seated, observing our breath, and now we can actually count. So if we see that it's a little bit difficult to keep our mind still, then we count. Inhale, exhale, 1. Inhale, exhale, 2. And so on. And normally we count up to 21. This technique, there are two different ways of doing it. There's a beginners and then there's a more advanced way. I suggest starting with the beginner's way, which is I inhale, exhale, and then I go back to 0 only if I forget if I forget where I am, what number I was on. You know, that can happen where then the mind just went somewhere and then we don't remember where we were. The advanced technique is where we inhale and exhale 1, and then if the mind goes anywhere other than counting on the breath, then we go back to 0. So in that case, if you do that right from the beginning, then you'll always be at number 1. You know, inhale, inhale, exhale. Okay, no, go back. Inhale, exhale. You know, because our mind is really used to jumping around. So at the beginning, let's try to at least keep a part of our mind on our breath. And gradually we're familiarizing our mind to be still on one thing. So we count up to 21. In reality, this technique is useful before doing single pointed meditation, and we do blocks of 7, 7, 14, 21. It's said that if in 7 the mind hasn't calmed down, then you go up to 14. If after 14 breaths your mind isn't calm, then you go up to 21. In some cases, you can even go even past 21, but normally we go up to 21. My advice is, first of all, we sit down, we do this pre-meditative exercise, we allow ourselves just to be, we dissolve our tensions, first of our body and then our mind. We inhale light, we exhale dark smoke. We create this safe place within ourselves, after which we place our attention on this, on the feeling of the air that comes in and comes out around our nostrils. We count, inhale, exhale, 1, and then when if a different thought comes, we just let it come and we let it go, and we just keep counting until 21. So these are just various passages that help us little by little without any great hurry of having to get somewhere. I think it's quite clear, no? So what we're doing actually is not just getting ourselves used to being, but there's something that comes together with this. When our mind is very used to jumping from one object to a next. What reaction do we have when there isn't when the stimuli are lacking or missing? We get bored. This feeling of boredom is actually a feeling of anxiety. I need to do something. And this can happen that one sits and then one needs to think about something, one needs to do something, and we need to allow ourselves to go beyond this because there's that phase where one tries to be or where one feels a little bit bored, the mind needs to do something else. When one keeps there, it's as if one could get tired or bored. But if you stay there, then one relaxes. You allow yourself to be there. It's important for us along our process to allow this to come up. Just you see the mind goes somewhere else, and then we sweetly, we kindly, gently bring it back, and we'll see that gradually we will be able to create a new habit. Clearly, this needs to be accompanied with behavior our outside between meditation sessions. We diminish the stimuli, because if once we finish meditation we go looking for lots of stimulation and information. So it's really important to diminish this external stimuli. And then once we actually reach a good level of concentration, then we can have as much stimuli as possible. But as we're training, it's important to diminish this the external stimuli. Once again, when our mind goes towards other objects, we shouldn't we shouldn't um, we shouldn't scorn ourselves. It's not the time that, oh, you shouldn't be thinking about that, you should doing this, you see you're not capable and this is worth. No, this is not the attitude we should have. Our attitude is being kind, is accepting and redirecting. There's a thought. Okay, let that thought go by, and we don't give it any energy. We don't nourish that thought. We don't get mixed up in that energy and into that thought. And there's another exercise we can do when we're not meditating to help us also during meditation. When we're concentrated on something, at a certain point, maybe the mind goes to something else. And at that point, before going back to what one was doing, one looks backwards. I don't know if that's clear. Like we're talking together, we're eating. At a certain point, we realize that we're talking about Eskimos. But what do Eskimos have anything to do with spaghetti? Oh, because I was talking about spaghetti, and I remember that time I was at that restaurant, I don't know where, when it was snowing, and then there the spaghetti was good, but outside there was so much snow, and I don't, we ended up talking about Eskimos. I mean, our mind does huge leaps. So if we train daily in walking backwards, that will um, help us in the future recognize quickly when we lose our concentration. So when we're in between sessions, we should try to have this kind of awareness. Okay, well, now I've been thinking about this, that's fine, but how did I get here? Oh, okay, because of this, that, and the other. For example, I realize when we talk a little bit, when we're just chatting, no? What happens? that we start with one subject and then we end up talking about something totally different. And for myself, what I try to do is I try to at least close up that first subject, go back, to that original subject. What were we talking about? I don't know. It happened this morning, talking with someone. I shared I shared a passage of a book that I want to share here with you. And then there was a comment, and then from that comment, just um, you know, and then it ended up talking about the sentimental the sentimental experience of this person, and instead uh, so trying to think, and how did we get, from this book, talking about this book, to this comment, to talking about the love life of this person. So, you know, if we have this awareness of knowing how to observe, the awareness, observing where our mind is going and directing our own thoughts, then that in meditation that will help us tremendously. So let's do this exercise even when we're talking. If at a certain point when we're chatting, and as we're chatting and we ended up on something totally different, how did we get here? Oh, because this took us to that and that took us to this other things, So let's try to close up this circle, at least go back to the beginning and close up that initial topic. So we do that with our own minds, and we just walk things backward to see where our mind was going, and just to have more awareness of our own thoughts. The 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 most difficult thing is when our mind just is totally distracted and we don't recognize it. So here I'm trying to meditate, and before I even know it, my mind is somewhere else. So no, mind, come back here, and then it runs off that way. If I have this habit of seeing the process of the mind, and I see that mind that's starting to leave, and then I can say, no, come back, come back. There's just more attention, there's more awareness. And here, just going to touch on this. In the afternoon, we'll talk about it. There are two antidotes, both for the mental agitation and for mental foggy and foggy mindedness. Trempa and Sheshing. I'm just going to touch on it now. They're represented here in this drawing. There's a kind of a stick with a hook, and there's a kind of lasso with hook. They can be translated in many ways. Trempa, we call it it's a kind of memory. It's like memory and awareness. I want to go, for example, from here to Milan, or here to Mount Kailash. I want to, or just here to Milan. I'm going. I take my route, my road. What if, as I'm going, I forget where I want to go? Either I stay on that same road, or I see something that I like and I just take that road because I've forgotten where I want to go. I see what I'm doing, but I don't remember what it is that I wanted to do. There's a friend of ours, and certainly many of you knew him. He's an Englishman who later in life became a monk, and he was really quite particular. He was like just a historical hippie. Um, he filled up his van and went to India, barefoot. He was really quite a character. Wonderful, beautiful person. Anyway, when he would travel, we'd take a trip. He never knew how long it would take him. You know, he'd go from here to Milan, then he would see the name of a town, and he liked the name of that town. He would just change his way, and he'd end up there. So, you know, so you sometimes, you know, oh, I just got back. Oh, you just came back from Milan. What time did you leave? I left this morning at 6, and it's like 7 o'clock. And he would do this also going back to England. He never knew how long it would take him. And when he would tell me this, um, he he so you know the point is if I want to go somewhere and I forget where I'm going to go, I actually forget and I lose contact with my object of meditation. Obviously, the mind easily goes somewhere else, and one antidote is to maintain contact with that object of meditation. I am going there, stay there. The other antidote is to have this awareness not of where I want to go, but what I'm doing. I want to go to Milan, I want to go to Turin, wherever I want to go, but I need to also be aware of what road I'm taking. And then I don't know if it's ever happened to you where you take a road, you know, you have this memory of where you want to go, but you didn't have that vigilance, awareness of what you were doing at the moment, and you end up on a wrong road. So I'm in contact with my object of meditation, and there's a part of mine that controls where my mind is present. There's a part of our mind that observes, that controls us, that in mindful recollection and vigilance in English. So to if we're able to maintain this awareness outside of meditation, this will help us a lot when we go to meditate. So, so if I see that I've gotten off the road, then I try to go backwards. But there's a whole process of self-awareness, and this is something that we should cultivate that will really help us a lot in meditation. So now we'll stop for lunch, and even during our lunch break, try to have awareness. I'm walking. How am I walking? I'm eating. I'm talking. Where is my mind? Try to bring our mind back. Try to have this attention of what we're doing, what we're saying, and in what we think. It's an illusion. This idea of having awareness of what we think, if you don't have the awareness of what you actually say and what you do. So first we need to control our speech and our and the things we do. So we direct our speech. We have awareness of our speech to then be able to direct our mind. Someone might say, well, that's difficult. I don't, according to me, it's a little tiring, sure, but it's not that hard. It's possible, isn't it? The hardest thing, in my opinion, is for it to really work. It requires constancy. It's not like doing once on 3 days over the weekend. It's maintaining this constancy day after day, week after week, month after month. Then that's where you really will see progress. Otherwise, you do a little here, you do a little there. No one could develop concentration over a weekend course. It doesn't work like this. So, given that most of us, when we, you know, so the emphasis of these texts are always about the meditative state, but given the life of most of us, do we spend more time meditating or more time between meditation sessions? When we do a meditation retreat, normally the time in meditation and the time between sessions is about the same. But in our case, how much time goes by between a meditation session and another? A day, a week, a month? You know, normally maybe maybe a day, 24 hours. You know, okay, maybe 23 hours and a half if one has constancy of doing it every day, where one finishes and one starts again. I mean, at least a day would go by, given that we spend much more time between our meditation sessions instead of actually in meditation. What we do in between these sessions, it's extremely important because our mind is is ab- is extremely influenced by what we do. So our techniques of observing our speech, observing our thoughts, having awareness of our emotions, you know, what's happening inside me, how do I react or act in our daily life, this is enormously important. So let's remember that to meditate is not just about sitting down to meditate. What I do after is is extremely important. They go hand in hand. So let's try to see as we eat, as we walk, and as we talk. Everything that we do, try to have presence and awareness. And when the mind goes somewhere else, so, you know, we just bring it back to our starting point. And this is something fun too. Okay, it's time we stop here. And if I remember well, the next session is at 3:30. So, like I said yesterday, I set the schedule, the programs, and then I forget them. So the next session is 3:30.
Lame kutse rapten chi nam kratin le chokchur ge padang losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munsela tatu ne gyur che kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche chi sadan lamge yende rabzone Dorje change kopa nyurtoba shu nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shin ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumki chingi lob kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol kuncho sumki trashi
Before concluding, something very short. Let's take advantage for this break time that today I had asked to dedicate a day, and they've decided to do it today. Dedicate a day to the work that Help in Action does. Work that Lama Ganchen began at the beginning of the 90s, because when he came to the West, he saw that the wealth he he wanted to bring the wealth of the East to the West, and the wealth of the West to the East. And because what was missing here was the spiritual wealth, and there in the East, in the East is missing a material wealth. And years later, an association was created, the Help in Action, where we do long distance adoptions. And for many years, we were able to help in Tibet. And then over the years, conditions have changed. And now we work mostly in Nepal. We help, there's a school, we help many, many children, about 500 children, founded also by Lama Ganshin and supported by us. Many, many beautiful things. And what the little that we're able to contribute is worth a lot over there. I'm very proud of this organization. Um, there, there are very few people actually working hard to do what needs to be done, but what we give goes to what actually needs to be done. Um, Unfortunately, sometimes the cost of keeping an organization going uses up all the resources. Instead, here we have very few people working to keep it up, and all of the resources go actually where they should go. So today there'll be a film, there'll be um, um, upstairs you can see this presentation, Help in Action, and the video. It'll be actually, I think there are too many of us here now to all fit at once, but I think that the video will go in loop, and and they're also working on a sand mandala. Um, Geshe Losang Punsak was supposed to do it, but he's not here today because a few days ago, an important Lama of our tradition, Palo Rinpoche, he was already quite old. He lived in Germany, and he left his body, and he was in Austria. And Geshe-la, who was here with us, he went there to help manage. And so Tenzin, our monk Tenzin, who just began a 3-year retreat, so he is he is not available for normally he wouldn't be available to do anything other than his retreat and the work he needs to do in between his sessions. But then I saw him last night. He was already working on this sun mandala, so we thank him. You know, the mandala also represents the many, many small seeds when put together can do so much, and what we're able to give helps a lot. And we've been able to support children from the time they were very, very young, all their schooling, accompanying them, and over many years we've been able to help them. So have a good lunch, everyone. We'll see you at 3:30.